Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading in the One-Year Bible. My name's Stephen Mizell, and Jay Rivenbark and I are joined by Sheryl Daughety this week, and we're looking today at the Proverbs reading, Proverbs 3, verses 16 through 18. And we talk about what wisdom means to bring life, how it brings peace, and the fruit that we hope that it produces in our own personal lives. So hope you'll grab a Bible and a pen and paper, and let's have a conversation around the Word of God. Hey everyone, today we're over in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. And the writer here personifies wisdom as a woman whose presence brings long-term blessing. And the verses here describe wisdom as this life-giving force that shapes things like character and decisions and destiny. And you guys have some questions, we're going to talk about, but was there something outside of those questions that you wanted to make sure we talked about?
The simple fact that he reminds us over and over again that the value of wisdom exceeds things, including commodities. In a couple previous verses, he talked about more than rubies and gold and silver and those things that we place such high value on, that even the things themselves without wisdom are problematic. And so wisdom itself is the value, where the real treasure is.
Yeah, it's like the people you see win a lottery of like millions, and then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, they're broke again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
because it's like Jay said, it's not the material things that are going to help you with your problems like you think they are if you have no wisdom and how to manage it.
This passage is one that not every day, but it's in my prayer time regularly. I keep an Evernote, and I move around in it, that there are some verses that I pray, and verses 13 through 18 are one of those. And I pray them around, so I have a certain place that I want to get to financially, that I know if I can get to that place, I will be able to give what I want to give for the rest of my life and never have to think about it. And when I was asking God, what verses can I pray? This was the one that I selected to pray with that every time I pray for it. And the thing that stuck out to me, and I've said I was going to do some writing about it, or I was going to preach a sermon about it, is in verse 16. And I didn't find a clean place for it to be in the sermon, but I'll tell you how I've processed it. But verse 16 says, long life is in her right hand, riches and honor in her left. And the thing I thought about, I don't know, maybe Jay, I shared this with you. I don't remember. So we were in, and this is culturally true. Still in places in the world today, that waiters, the reason why waiters put their left hand behind their back is because that was the hand that was dirty, right? You used it to clean yourself if you'd used the bathroom. There are still some cultures that still do that, like, in the world today, that's still true. Even cultures that you would think they had moved beyond that. I remember the teams coming back from India talking about going on the train, and they would have a cup of water for people to rinse their hands off, after they had cleaned themselves in the bathroom. But when I read this, he says, long life's in the right hand, but you got to deal with a lot of crap for riches and honor. Mm. And I have found that to be true, right? If there are things you want in life, you are going to have to deal with a lot of crap to get there. There's no such thing. You mentioned winning the lottery. Very few people do. Mm-hmm. Most people that have anything get it because they waded through all the stuff to be able to get there. And every time I read it, that's what I think about, What am I going to have to deal with today?
Yeah.
What kind of crappy situation have I got to sort through, to be able to get to where I want to go and to do what I want to do. So what does it mean that wisdom is a tree of life?
The two main things that came to my mind were the tree that produces fruit. And so I think that having wisdom is something that is going to provide for you over and over and over again. It's something that's going to last a lifetime. And I also think of a tree that has its strong roots. And I think that wisdom helps provide that for you. It provides you with strong roots and stability. I think it gives you stability in situations where without wisdom you wouldn't have it.
Yeah, I was thinking in the same vein that it's producing fruit, it's stable, but I also thought about in the sense of a tree, that's a process of time usually. There's a maturity and development period before it ever gets the deep roots, gets to the place where it's fruitful and productive. And the other thing as relates to trees, they're not so easily affected by today's circumstance. There are some plants, some things that if it gets too hot today, it's the end of them. Or if it's too cold overnight, that's the end of them. Whereas a tree just has this ability just to keep going in every season. And I see that is what wisdom does for us in our lives, that it helps us to be able just to continue on. There may be seasons where we're not as fruitful or productive, but we're still stable, still there, still going on, and knowing that there will come a time when that will change. And so I see it as long-term stability that's not easily affected by today's circumstance.
The Hebrew word there is spelled Chai, which is the same way people would order a tea, chai tea, but I don't think it's pronounced that way in Hebrew. It's going to have some sound to it, most likely. I mean, really, that's how those words are pronounced, the CHs. But it means vitality or flourishing. And when I think of wisdom, I think the places in my life where I experience the most vitality and the most flourishing are places where I've practiced wisdom over a long period of time. The places where I don't are the places where I have made poor decisions. And I think that's God's, original design. He wanted us to flourish. He tells us in Genesis, be fruitful, multiply. There should be some kind of flourishing that takes place in your life. And I think wisdom just connects us back to that. So if wisdom leads to flourishing, or it's a tree of life, how does it also lead to peace?
I think the number one reason is that it leads you to peace is because it keeps you from making bad and hurried decisions. It helps you. It helps a lot when you don't feel pressured or like you're on your own to make this decision, but you give it time to use the wisdom He's given you to make the right decision. And I think some other things that I think about are that it also keeps you from making fear-based decisions, which I feel like I see people do pretty often. Like Jay talked about just a few minutes ago with the tree, it keeps you stable under any circumstance, which can keep you from making a lot of bad decisions and giving you peace. Not easily being swayed by opinions. I think it helps you have financial peace when you use wisdom with the resources that God's provided for you. It helps you have peace in your finances. And I also think that it gives you peace in knowing when it's time to fight for something and when it's time to let something go.
Yeah, I see wisdom as it relates to peace with two primary approaches. One is you're able to avoid things like conflict, bad decisions that will cost you peace, but also to make right choices and decisions that lead to peace. You mentioned finances. That's such a big area where people lack peace. But wisdom, whether it's putting everything in retirement that you talked about earlier, or just making good choices, to live debt-free or whatever it looks like, that brings a level of peace. And those things come about as a result of wisdom. So wisdom helps us to avoid a lot of things one side of the ledger, but also helps us to make right choices and decisions on the other that bring peace, in relationships would be a great example. And so I see it as twofold.
You talked about finances, people having unrest. I don't think amount has anything to do with rest, because I think there are people who have lots and are unrest, have unrest, and there are people who have a little that have unrest, and there are people who have a lot that have peace, and people who don't have a lot that have peace. I don't think the amount is relevant. I think alignment. Is this what God wants, and is this where I'm supposed to be doing what? Is this how He wants me to use it? And when I think of peace, I think of, the word shalom means wholeness, harmony, like nothing is missing, nothing is broken kind of thing. And I think wisdom allows you to be able to put things in its right place, to see where it's supposed to fit, to put things in the order that they need to go. And because when you're younger and you don't have as much wisdom, you often are feels like you're chasing your tails, always, just spinning your wheels. But as you gain wisdom, you're able to put some things in order and go, okay, I don't need to do this. I do need to do this. And occasionally, I think you get better at saying no because sometimes you have to say no to have the alignment that you want. So in your own personal life, what fruit do you hope that wisdom will produce?
I think the biggest thing in my life that I hope it produces is that I'm investing my time and energy in the right places. And, that includes strong relationships and the right relationships, and keeping Christ at the center of my life are the main things that I think I always pray that's what that brings.
I listed all the fruit of the Spirit because I need all of them to be increased in a measure in my life. But I would say, if I had to narrow it down to two, it would probably be patience, and which would help with the second one would be peace in relationships. Because I find the more that I am patient before I say things, before I respond, before I act, that the more peace I experience in my life. And that all connects right back with wisdom.
Yeah, the two things that I have seen wisdom provide, and I hope wisdom continues to provide, is stability and consistency. Those are things that I find valuable in other people. Yeah. Okay, I know what to expect, and I know I can depend on them, whatever that looks like, And I would hope in my life that wisdom produces consistency and stability, where everything is not always up in the air, right? You never know whether you can count on somebody, That's
exhausting.
It is. It's exhausting. Yeah. And when you feel like you have stability and other people don't, that's when it's really, because you're picking up the pieces of the puzzle, which messes up your consistency and stability, creates challenges. So thank you for joining us again on One Single Story. True wisdom does not make life easier, but it does make life whole. I hope you'll practice wisdom today, and I hope you'll join us again on the next edition of One Single Story.